step inside and do me 1,000 years of time.
But she said you can walk up there.
Yeah, I would imagine you can't though. I think she might be slightly misinformed. So here we have the history of it,
Wanna go in
the
the
beginnings
stops?
of Oxford. You don't want to tour though, you want to go
Yeah,
in.
you can only go by tour.
Can you?
So we don't want the
Well, there's people
prison
over there
as
waiting
well,
as
do we? So yeah.
Sightseeing bus tour. No, you don't want to book a bus tour.
Yeah, come on through.
Come on through. Can I pin this on you?
Yeah, of course.
Is that the best place for it?
Just pop it here, I
On
would
there,
say.
yeah. Lovely stuff, great stuff. Thank you so much. It's just that way we'll be able to hear you properly later on as well.
Of course.
Thank you.
Hi there, what's the name?
Anderson.
Anderson, perfect. Yes, come on through for me.
Yeah. Jumped at the chance.
Hi
there.
A bit early, is that okay?
What time are you booked for?
Past.
There'll be another tour just for that. It's
Yeah,
just,
we'll wait
if
a
that's
minute.
all right.
Okay,
Sorry, thank you.
Looks like we're going to get a presentation.
Fantastic. Now you're more than welcome to sit down on the bench if you like to make yourself more comfortable, as I am just going to talk at you for the next 5 minutes. And throughout this tour you can take as many pictures and videos as you like, so go for it. Wonderful. So, welcome everyone to the Oxford Castle and Prison. My name is Joe and I'll be your tour guide for today. So the plan for today's tour is we're going to have a bit of an explore around our site. We'll go to the very top of St. George's Tower, we'll then go downstairs and explore our Norman crypt, and then we'll finish off through the prison wing itself. But in order to understand how we got here and why we're here, we need to go all the way back to the beginning. So, Oxford. It starts off as a small Anglo-Saxon town by the name of Oxenforde. And to protect us from the Viking invaders, we built 4 stone towers to protect us from the north, the south, the east, and the west, which is where we are right now. Hence why we have the Westgate Shopping Centre just over that way there. Except the tower that we're in was formerly known as Westgate Tower, is now known as St. George's Tower instead. Now, in 1066, we had the Battle of Hastings, where William the Conqueror defeats King Harold for the throne of England. And after this, he decides to gift parts of England to his loyal barons. And Oxford is gifted to a man called Robert D'Oyley, who in 1071 is tasked to build a big and mighty castle in a nice big circle attached to this tower here. Now, if you look towards the walls either side of me, you can see that they are very thick. In fact, they are 3 meters thick, or 9 feet thick, which we discovered was very good at keeping people out, but also very good at keeping people in. Which is why in 1216 we opened our doors for the very first time as a functioning prison. Except the very first prisoners that we had here are probably not the ones you would think of, as they were actually the drunk and rowdy students from Oxford University. Yes, except they were 14 years old, drunk and wielding swords. So a little bit more dangerous than today's ones, I'd say. Now, we were a prison all the way up until 1996, so this year will be 30 years since our closure. And I would say throughout the whole time of us being a prison, the Victorian times were by far the worst, because this is when we introduced hard labour, which is work that was very long, very grueling, but most definitely pointless to stop you wanting to come into prison. In this room down here. Now, the next thing I'll mention are the stairs that we're going to climb. They're called Norman tripping steps, and they were designed to kill you. At least they were back in the day. You see, they're made out of different shapes and sizes, so the plan was if you were the enemy charging up the stairs with a sword in your hand, hopefully you would trip and fall and stab yourself on the way down, so you'd be one less person for them to worry about up at the top. And the final thing I'll mention, that door that we all just came through is the tallest one in the tower. So if you had to duck through that one, you'll definitely have to duck through the rest of them as well. Now, is there anyone who would prefer to just stay down here, just so I know? Fantastic. I'll pop the video on for yourself. Hopefully it works today. It does. Fantastic. Well, for those of you who are coming, if you'd all like to follow me, right this way.
My place coming.
Clear to Matilda's.
Staying down here.
But it's only for this part.
No, it's for the rest of the tour. Yeah. Right, his transmitter's gone.
Oh, you can't hear him.
He won't talk to all there anyway, so it doesn't matter. He'll just reconnect. Yeah, so we cut off halfway through what he was saying because the storage got full up. Someone forgot to switch it back to the 128 gigabytes instead of 48 gigabytes. It might get a little bit dark now.
Anybody counting?
He said it's 300, didn't he?
No, 100.
I'm getting dizzy. Oh, I had my back to make this.
Fantastic, yes, do just mind those heads as you go on through.
Thank you.
Of course. Fantastic, yes, do mind your head.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic.
Oh, it's chilly up here, isn't it?
Wonderful. Right, everyone. So if you look up, you'll be able to see those two large water tanks, which I just mentioned downstairs. So just to emphasize how pointless hard labor was, you spend all those hours turning the capstan wheel downstairs, water would be pushed up through these pipes into the water tanks, but as soon as you stopped turning the capstan wheel, all that water would just come back down the pipes and back into the mill. So all of your hard work was for nothing. They wanted you to feel very miserable during your time here. Now, there are two stories I'd like to tell you all, and the first one is about Oxford's very own princess who came to stay here. Her name was Empress Matilda. So she was the granddaughter of William the Conqueror and the daughter of King Henry I. She marries a man by the name of Geoffrey of Anjou and moves to France to start a family with him. However, while she's away, her father, the king, had died, meaning that someone else needed to take over as the next ruler. So she was meant to be the first Queen of England, a very important time. But when she gets back to England, her cousin Stephen's already got there first and proclaimed himself as the new King of England. So this starts off as a little bit of a family feud. It then grows into a civil war called the Anarchy. And in 1142, so 4 years into this civil war, Matilda comes to Oxford. But Stephen and his army are not that far behind. So Matilda and her 3 trusted men are trapped inside this tower and surrounded by Stephen and his army. His plan was to wait for her to run out of food and water until she hopefully surrenders. But she never does. In fact, she escapes. So this is the story of how Empress Matilda escaped from this tower. So she waits for a very dark and snowy night in December, and her 3 trusted men dress from head to toe in white cloaks to blend in with the snow outside. They tie their bed sheets together, manage to climb out the window until they get to the base of the tower. Now once they get there, they need to start covering up their tracks, so they all decide to start walking backwards away from the tower, so their footprints looked like they were going to the tower instead. Then they approach the frozen River Thames and decide to make their own ice skates out of horsebone and skate 9 miles across the frozen River Thames until they reached Abingdon, where they then got on horseback and rode to Wallingford Castle to continue the war for another 10 years. I don't know about you, but I think that story's pretty hard to believe. But despite all of this effort, she still did not become the queen. In fact, after 14 years of fighting, her and Stephen finally decided enough was enough. And so they had a truce. And the deal was that Stephen was allowed to continue to be the king, but after he died, it was then up to Matilda's firstborn son to take over as the next king. So Matilda's son becomes King Henry II, who starts the Plantagenet dynasty. And the Plantagenets were on the throne for just over 300 years. So not too bad. Now the second story. Not a nice story. It's another civil war, this time in 1642, between King Charles I and Parliament. So King Charles I was quite controversial. He's very outspoken about his beliefs, as he believed he could rule the whole of England without the help of Parliament. So tries to get rid of them, which of course they do not like. So they decide to fight back, and out breaks a civil war between the royalists and the parliamentarians. At this point, King Charles I has to flee from London because the parliamentarians have taken over. So where does he go to? Oxford, as he wants to turn Oxford into his brand new royalist capital. However, he decides not to live in Oxford Castle because it wasn't pretty enough for him. So he decides to stay in Christchurch instead. But he wants to make use of this building, so he turns it into a prisoner of war camp instead. So in this room, you would have up to 60 parliamentarian prisoners. 60. So if you wanted to go to sleep, you'd have had to lean against the walls or lean against each other to prod each other up, because you did not want to sleep on the floor. As you can see, there are no toilets in this room, and they were known as traitors to the king, therefore they didn't deserve a bucket. So if anyone needed to go to the toilet, they just went where they stood. And our records show that the human waste was so high, it went just above their ankles. Yes, it gets worse, unfortunately. You see, because of this, disease would then spread very quickly. So unfortunately, a lot of those men would lose their lives. And if someone died in this room, their body was just left to rot amongst the living. That was up until cleaning day, so these rooms did get cleaned, but it only happened once every 3 months. So you can imagine the smell. Sadly, all of this continued for 4 years until 1646. And throughout this time, it sort of becomes a conveyor belt of taking bodies out and putting new prisoners in. But also during this time, many prisoners actually managed to escape. Because in order to clean the rooms, you need to take the prisoners out of them, which was the perfect opportunity for many of them to fight their way to freedom. Any of them who were successful would get away from this place and write letters to the leader of the parliamentarians. His name was Sir Thomas Fairfax. So essentially they wrote about all the horrendous conditions that they were going through. Sir Thomas Fairfax reads about this and he's so angry and disgusted he needs to see it for himself. And when he gets here, he is horrified to the point where he decides everything needs to be destroyed. So he does. He destroys everything. And that is why there is nothing really left of the original castle. All that's left is St. George's Tower, where we are right now. He also left the mound, the big hill outside, and he also left St. George's Crypt, which we'll go and see a little bit later on. But for now, what we're going to do is continue our climb all the way up to the very top. So just to remind you all, please do mind your heads, and the stairs are still trying to kill you. So do take your time. I'll see you all at the top. Clear to the top of the tower. Heading to the top now.
Round and round and round we go. Almost there, I can see daylight.
Fantastic. Now do just mind your head as you come on through.
So how many times do you do this a day?
6 times a day.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, you're number 2 so far. Fantastic. Yes, do mind those heads as you come on through. We've got a bit of an archway here that's a bit deceiving. Of course. Fantastic. Yes, do mind those heads as you come on through. Perfect. Feel free to explore anywhere you like. You can go all the way to the top if you want. Yes, do mind those heads as you come on through.
Thank you.
Perfect. Fantastic. Yes, do mind your head as you come on through. Perfect. Yes, do mind those heads. I may sound like a broken record, but there's always one. Fantastic. Good job, my friend. Do mind those heads as you come on through. Yes, do mind those heads as you come on through. Fantastic. Yes, do mind your head. Wonderful. So everyone, this is your opportunity to walk around, explore, take pictures and videos. We're going to be up here for about 4 or 5 minutes or so, and I'll mention a few facts in a moment, but for now, enjoy.
Now we're going to get a proper view. I think it's a cool view from up here, to be honest.
Ah, so this is Percy. He's a peregrine falcon, and he's here to protect us from our new enemy, which is the pigeons.
Right.
So yes, this tower, ever since the prisoners stopped being in here, it was used for storage. And essentially, if a prisoner was on good behaviour, they could come up here and scare away the pigeons. And when we closed in 1996, we replaced them with Percy. So he's been up here for about 20 years, and the pigeons still have no idea he's not moved. So still pretty good. Yeah, so he's used as a scarecrow, essentially. Yeah.
You can stand in it now.
In what?
I haven't got pictures of you.
That's because I break cameras.
Right, everyone, so I'm going to mention just a few facts for you. Again, feel free to walk around and explore as I talk, but essentially the first thing I'll mention, in that direction over there, we have our mound, or the big hill. So Robert Doyley, the man who built the castle, wanted to do a very simple Motte and Bailey design. So the Motte is the mound, the big hill, and the Bailey was the small village which was inside the castle walls. Originally, on top of the mound, there used to be a 10-sided tower called the Keep. And this was the last form of defence we had against the Vikings. Originally, it was made out of wood, but it kept getting burnt down. So we finally learnt our lesson and built it out of stone. However, what will become a bit of a reoccurring theme on this tour is Sir Thomas Fairfax wanting to destroy everything because of what happened downstairs to the parliamentarians. So that is why the keep is no longer there, because he destroyed it. But if you do go at the mound later on, you'll be able to see all that's left of it is the flat top surface of where the tower once stood, and inside the mound is still the well chamber, which is what they used to produce water up to the keep. The next thing to mention, which some of you probably already know at this point, but if you look towards all of these archways embedded in the walls, you can see a cross shape. Now, most of them have eroded over time, which is why they've got metal bars in their place, but that one over there we've actually restored to what they would have looked like. The cross shape has no religious purpose to it whatsoever, only practical, because up here you would have your archers. And so the slit from the top to the bottom was for your bow and arrow, and the cross slit was for your crossbow. And it was designed in a very specific way so that you could get to the enemy, but you were protected by them as well. Unless they were a cracking shot, but I haven't got any stories to say otherwise, unfortunately. And the final thing I'll mention, it's a bit of a silly fact, but I find it quite funny. So at one point of our tenure as a prison, we did have a women's section in the Victorian times in a building just over that way there. But when we closed in 1996, we sold off quite a bit of our land to other companies. So now the former women's section of the prison is our local Wetherspoons pub. It's called the Swan Inn Castle, and it's just over that way there. So feel free to have a bit of a walk. So what I'm going to do now, everyone, is essentially I'm waiting for the group that started after us to go into the room that we were just in. Once they are in, we will start making our way back down. So again, if you haven't had the opportunity to go up, please do. Feel free to have a bit of an explore again, and I'll let you know when we're going to make our way down. Of course. The group is currently walking up the stairs to go into the room we were just downstairs. So what we're going to do is we're going to get ready to go downstairs. If we stop on the stairs, that is purely because we're just waiting for them to go through. Don't be alarmed. And then we're going to carry on to basically go through, essentially. So when you're all ready, if you want to come meet me down here.
Huh? No, right.
Rory, I'm just going to come meet. Thank you very much.
Quite. When we done St Michael's Man in London.
How big's your group?
Concentrating, are you?
Can you imagine doing this?
It's nice that it's all
Oh,
filled
don't.
out, which is good. No, everyone's really good.
Do you remember St Michael's Man in London?
How many of my group was down
No,
there?
it's not
Was
St
it?
Michael's,
I knew it was
it's
a grandmother with the
just a
two
tower
under fives, and then there was another woman.
Walked up.
There's about 4 or 5 of them or something. Yeah, that's fine.
And I've got one family same place.
Okay, cool,
It's not
cool.
close, not far from Thames. I can't remember the name of the area. From the Thames.
Fantastic. Right, we're going to continue our way down. Thank you for your patience.
Can't be 3,000.
I don't know, probably miles out.
Yes, the ones in yellow are the narrowest of ones.
The monument, that's in the Tower of London.
Yeah, that. Yeah, that's it.
That's the same height as this. Oh no, it's taller.
No, it's taller than this.
Oh, we're past halfway, aren't we?
Yeah, that's the room there. There's a dodgy step there, Mum. Very small one. Just there.
Yeah, all right.
You alright?
Yeah.
And then you're going to get blinded on this bit here.
You just have to be careful no one falls on you.
Yeah, because you're not going to stop till you get to the bottom.
It's our daily exercise done now. Well, we tried to make them a bit easier by putting the wooden caps over the original stone.
They do a stair lift in there.
Ah, yeah.
Standard stair lift.
Well, yes, exactly. Yeah, the original stone is still underneath, but we had to restructure the stairs, which is why some doorways you might have seen have suddenly blocked by the stairs.
Yeah.
So the first door that we came past, that was the actual room that Empress Matilda was trapped in. We can't go in there for health and safety reasons, but yeah. Because the amount of people that are like, but how did she escape through that window? And it's like, it's not that window, it's a different window, but yeah, one of them. Fantastic. Well, whilst we're waiting for the last few to come down the stairs, you may have noticed that the capstan wheel is not there anymore. And that's because of a very specific reason. Because in the Victorian times, there was a new law introduced called the Silencing Act. And if you were a prisoner in Victorian England, you were not allowed to talk. So if you were caught coughing or sneezing too loudly, you'd be punished for it as well. But when it came to the capstan wheel, there was a bit of a loophole, because as prisoners were turning it around, it created a very loud and harsh grinding sound, which the guard who was stood about here did not want to listen to all day, which allowed the opportunity for the prisoners to have small conversations underneath the sound of the grinding. This went on for quite a period of time, till one of the guards heard about it, and as a consequence, destroyed the capstan wheel and moved on to other forms of hard labour, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Fantastic. How many more are after you? Just one? Fantastic. The last one? Fantastic. Well, well done, everyone. You've all managed to do what the Vikings could not, which was to go up the tower and come back down alive. It's a good start to the tour. Now we've been to the top, it's time for us to go down to the bottom as we explore St. George's Crypt. There are modern stairs this time, so a bit easier as well, only 12 of them. But when we get down into the crypt, just mind your step, because some areas are a little bit of a trip hazard. But despite that, if you'd all like to follow me, right this way. Fantastic. See, much nicer stairs. Yes, we do like to treat you. I know. We did petition for a zip line to get down, but they said no. Yeah. Something about medieval accuracy, you know.
Fantastic.
So she had to put her iPad away.
Yeah, I heard her say, just let me put my iPad away. It's got to be authentic, hasn't it?
Can you come on, darling, please? Keep going. Carry on.
You may notice by the side on the walls that there is moss growing. So even in the darkest of places, life still grows. Fantastic. Yes, those of you coming in, you're more than welcome to walk around the space. Of course, just mind where you step, as some areas are quite uneven. So for this bit, I'm just going to talk at you. So again, feel free to explore as I talk. But welcome everyone to St. George's Crypt. So originally, above our heads was St. George's Chapel. And the chapel and the crypt were both built at the exact same time, in 1074. So 3 years after the original castle was built. Again, by the same person, Robert D'Oyly. But this time it came about in a bit of a weird way. Because one night, Robert D'Oyly had a nightmare, where he saw the Virgin Mary stood at the foot of his bed and she was pointing down to the ground. So he was very scared by this experience and thought he needed to repent for his sins. So he ended up building a chapel, which used to be above our heads, and the crypt where we are stood right now. And even though it came about in a bit of a weird way, the chapel was actually held very highly in the world of higher education, as it was built 100 years before Oxford University was even a thing. So this was the place for education. We once had a student here by the name of Geoffrey of Monmouth, and he wrote a book called A History of the Kings of Britain. Inside this book, you would find characters such as King Arthur and the wizard Merlin. There was also the first recorded mention of King Lear, which Shakespeare then used to put in his own play as well. Now, if you look towards these 4 pillars around me here, you can see that they've been beautifully carved by the Norman stonemasons. The designs on these pillars are meant to look like palm trees, and they were painted in very bright and beautiful colours. The original ceiling was painted to look like the night sky, and many tapestries were hung all around the room. So again, it was very beautiful. But as I mentioned earlier, which will become a bit of a reoccurring theme on this tour, is Sir Thomas Fairfax wanting to destroy everything because of what happened to the parliamentarians in the Tower. So that is why the chapel is no longer here, because he destroyed it. But a consequence of destroying the chapel meant all the rubble came down into this crypt. So the crypt was actually buried and lost for just over 100 years. And it wasn't rediscovered until the late 1790s, so the Georgian era, by a prison governor called Daniel Harris. So one day, Daniel Harris, along with his prisoners, were building D-Wing, which is the corridor just above our heads, when suddenly the floor just caves in, and they managed to rediscover the crypt, at least what was left of it. So Daniel Harris had the great idea to restore the crypt and extend it as well, which was another job he gave to his prisoners. Unfortunately, he didn't really have any money to do it. So in order to get the job done properly, but also quite cheaply as well, they would reuse and recycle as many materials as they could find. And that's why the floor is so uneven, because it's a mixture of rubble, cobblestone and brick that have all been cemented into place. They also did a very similar thing to the ceiling, which is why just above me here is a keyhole. Because this used to be a part of a door, and they just basically upcycled it into a ceiling tile. Yeah, they're pretty inventive back in those days. So the original size of the crypt was actually quite small. It only really went up around these 4 pillars here. So they created a huge extension, and they built those 2 pillars just there. If you look carefully, you can see they don't have the same corner carvings like these original 4, as those 2 were done by the prisoners. But considering that they had to teach themselves stonemasonry skills, I think they did a really good job. After all, it has been holding up the ceiling for just under 300 years. So now I think it's only fair that we should go and appreciate the rest of their handiwork as we head upstairs to D-Wing, and we'll check out some of the prison cells as well. And just to say, it may feel like I'm pulling you from room to room, but I do promise, after the tour, you can revisit any of the rooms that we've been to. But until then, if you'd all like to follow me, back upstairs.
Was the hook part of the prison, or?
So you'd hang your lanterns on it, essentially. Yes. Yeah, you'll see quite a few of them dotted around our site.
So I take it you're a prisoner.
Pardon?
You're a prisoner.
Yes, I'm dressed as a Victorian prisoner. Yes,
That-
all
that
the
would
tour
work.
guides are dressed as various prisoners from different eras. Georgian, Victorian, Eddie. Fantastic. Right this way, my friends, so you can sit down anywhere you
no.
like. Sit down on any of the boxes. Of course. Fantastic. Yes, come on in and find a seat. Welcome to prison.
No, this is
Fantastic, yes, right this way.
I was going
Come
to
on in, find a seat, make some friends. That's what prison's all about, right? Fantastic, yes, come on in and find a seat.
Okay, yeah.
Fantastic. Yes, right this way. Come on in and find a seat. If there's no more seats, you're more than welcome to sit down on the wooden skirting underneath the windows as well.
Bugs up with it.
Fantastic. Right this way. Wonderful. I think this is everyone. Fantastic. Right, everyone. So you can see this room has a bit of a strange layout to it because these are actually two separate prison cells. You can see we've knocked the wall down in the middle to make this room a bit bigger. But I want you all to imagine the wall has been put back up. Suddenly the space gets a whole lot smaller. Now in the 1970s we had a bit of an overcrowding problem. So we actually only had the capacity for 159 prisoners. But in 1976 we had 362 prisoners, which amounts to each cell having either 3 or 4 prisoners in them. To make things even worse, none of our cells had toilets in them. We had a specific toilet block, which roughly worked out to about 1 toilet per 100 prisoners. Wow. So you can understand why we eventually closed. It was too medieval, essentially. Now, the next thing I want you to look at is this device right here. So this is called the pillory, and it often gets mistaken for the medieval stocks. You see, the stocks are actually just used for your legs. They're named after stockings. They're just a long piece of wood with about 5 or 6 holes in it, and their job was to put your legs inside to make you sit down and be bored for a long period of time. It was very harmless. The pillory, however, took this to the next level, as the prisoner's head and hands would be placed through the various holes and they'd be locked into place. These were positioned in very public places like the town centre or the courtyard of the castle, so anyone walking past can see that you have been up to no good. Therefore you deserve to be punished and humiliated. So people would start to throw things at you, like rotten fruit and vegetables. They'd empty their chamber pots on you as well, so be covered in human waste, and they'd even throw dead rodents like dead rats as well. But it can go even further than that, because there was once a man by the name of Roland Jenks, who was a Roman Catholic bookseller, and in 1577 he was accused of distributing anti-Protestant propaganda. And within this propaganda, he did not talk very nicely about Queen Elizabeth I, who was our Protestant queen at the time. So he was arrested, and his punishment was to be pilloried by the ears. Which essentially meant when you were in that position, a guard would come along, grab you by the ears, spread them across the wood, get a hammer and 2 long nails, and smack your ears into place. The reason for doing this was to stop you from flinching or looking away when people threw things at you. So he was sentenced to be like that for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, this is where the story takes a bit of a turn, because right after his sentencing, just over 600 men of the courtroom that day grew very, very sick. And then within a few weeks, just over 300 of those men died. But the weird thing was, it was only the men a part of Jenks's case, like the judge, the jury, and the members of the university. But this strange sickness didn't affect any women, any children, or any prisoners at the time either, despite the fact that the prison and the courtroom were together on this site. So there was only one explanation for this. It was a curse placed by Roland Jenks on the courtroom that day. It was known as the Black Assizes of Oxford, and everyone was so nervous and so paranoid about this curse, they thought the only way to get rid of it was to tear down the courtroom, which is why it's not here anymore, unfortunately. We have a habit of losing our buildings. Now, of course, historians have looked at this case for many years and have come up with an alternative theory. You see, if you get a load of people together, shove them in a small room for a very long period of time, eventually disease is going to spread. This was known as jail fever, or typhus is what we know it as today. Roland Jenks was just one of many men subjected to those environments riddled with these diseases. The rich men of the courtroom up above were never exposed to those environments, therefore they couldn't build up an immunity to fight it. So imagine Roland Jenks stood in the courtroom pleading his case. He's talking and spitting and touching things, spreading his germs very easily. At this point, it just becomes a 50-50 chance on who's going to survive and who's going to die. But what happened to Roland Jenks? Well, after his 3 days and 3 nights, the guard comes up to him, releases one of his hands, and gives him a knife. And said, you can cut yourself free. But you weren't allowed to cut where the nails were. You had to cut both of your ears clean off. Because this is the only way you would gain your freedom. Either you cut them off yourself, or they would do it for you. And afterwards, you'd be known as earmarked. And that's where we get our phrase earmarked from in the English language. This works in two ways. The first way, you chop your ears off, you go free, and for the rest of your life, everyone can see that you have no ears and they knew that you were a criminal at some point. The other way of this is you go free, but your ears stay nailed to the pillory. So imagine walking through the streets doing your weekly shop and you'd see a pillory with a load of ears nailed to it and you think, I'm not going to commit a crime today. So as a way to deter people. Roland Jenks, after this, he ends up fleeing to Flanders in Belgium, where he lives the rest of his life as a baker. But it does beg the question though, was the curse real or was it just jail fever? I'll let you decide on that one. But if there's one thing that we should all learn from Roland Jenks, is that we should probably flee this room. So if you want to follow me this way. From here, you can sit down anywhere. Chairs, the benches, go for it. Treat yourself. We're living the life of luxury now. Fantastic. Yes, feel free to sit down anywhere you like.
No, don't see it.
Fantastic. Yes, do come on in. You can sit down anywhere you like. Wonderful. Right, everyone. So you can see this room is a little bit nicer compared to the last one. So we've now travelled 200 years into the future. We're now in the late 1790s, also known as the Georgian era. And so life as a Georgian prisoner was a little bit different because you could have a few luxuries in your cell with you, like a very nice bed, a tea set, things like that. The difference was you now had to pay for everything in prison, as prisons are now privately owned institutions run for profit. Us specifically, we were owned by Christ Church College, and this meant even our guards were not paid very well, therefore they were quite susceptible to bribes. So the prisoners found out very quickly, the more money they spent, the better the experience they had. But if you didn't have any money, then you were pretty miserable. Your bed would not exist. You'd have to share your cell with about 5 other people, and that's half the size of this room, and the food was disgusting. However, if you had lots and lots of money, life was pretty good for you. And that was the case of a woman called Mary Blandy. So Mary Blandy was one of the richest people to stay here in Oxford Prison. Originally, she lived with her father, Francis Blandy, who was a clerk from Henley, a very wealthy family, very high up in society. But the thing about Georgian society was how everyone saw you meant everything. And this included marriage. So Mary was approaching 30 years old and she wasn't yet married, which was considered a bit of a scandal back in the day. So to avoid any scandal from happening, her father Francis places a dowry upon her of £10,000. In today's money, that's about £2.8 million. And that would go to whoever would want to marry her. Suddenly Mary is a very popular person. And there's a huge queue of potential suitors outside her front door. One of them being a man called William Cranston, who is a Scottish army officer, a very well-respected man. And when the two of them met, they got on very well. So much, in fact, they are now engaged to be married. But before their wedding can go ahead, Francis Blandy wants to do a bit of a background check onto William, just to make sure he is who he says he is. Good thing he did, because it turns out William was already married and had 2 children back in Scotland, which he kind of forgot to mention. So understandably, Francis was pretty angry. So he calls off the wedding, he kicks William out of the house and forbids the two from ever speaking again, leaving poor Mary heartbroken and William very angry because he was so close to the money. So he comes up with a new plan. He starts to write Mary lots and lots of love letters till eventually she starts to write them back. And one day, William sends Mary a letter containing a vial of white powder. In the letter, he says that this is a love potion. But not for Mary, but for her father, Francis. Apparently, if she was to mix this love potion into her father's food, he'll eventually fall in love with the idea of those two getting married. Yeah, most people would question this. However, Mary was too in love with William to decide. So, she does everything he asks her to do. She sneaks into the kitchen over a period of a few days and mixes this love potion into her father's food. But he does not fall in love. he falls dead. And that's the end of Frances Blandy. The cooks in the kitchen grew very suspicious of Mary, as a woman of Mary's status is not normally found in the kitchen. Suddenly she has a huge interest in being there. Someone even spots her mixing something into her father's food. So when he died, they just put two and two together and they informed the authorities. Mary was arrested and brought here to await her trial. But the thing is, Mary's just inherited quite a bit of money from her father, so she wouldn't have had to stay in a room like this. She actually rented out 2 large rooms in the governor's mansion, just over there. So one room was for her, the other was for her maid to do all of the housework for her. Now it's good that she did have a maid because someone needed to clean up after all the tea parties she was having. So many tea parties with all of her fellow inmates. And she even once hosted a winter ball at Christmas time and invited all of her friends into the prison to have a party. So she had a great time in prison, she was living it up. But unfortunately, it was all about to come crashing down. As in England, we were about to perform one of the very first autopsies. And it just so happened to be on her father, Francis. So they test his body to figure out why he died, and that's when they found out he was poisoned with white arsenic. So by the time her trial came around, she didn't really have a leg to stand on. William Cranston had fled the country, so no one knew where he was, and the love letters, which would have been very good evidence, were burnt by Mary herself. Because when she found out William was lying about everything, one night in a fit of rage, she burned the letters between the two of them. But by doing so, she's now gotten rid of any of the evidence to help her case. So with this gone, no one believes her side of the story. So sadly, Mary Blandy is sentenced to be hanged. So to be hanged was a very public event back in those days. You'd be lifted up to about 9 foot into the air, so a huge crowd of people would gather around and watch. The mound outside was known as Hangman's Hill because it's a great place to sit down and watch the hangings. And because this was such a huge scandal for the time, it meant many people travelled far and wide to watch the end of Mary Blandy. And sadly, Mary Blandy was hanged on the 6th of April, 1752. However, William Cranston did get his comeuppance in the end. Eventually, he returned home to his wife and children, but at this point, his wife had heard about everything. So she kicks him back out the house, he spends the rest of his life on the run, and eventually dies of syphilis. In a French nunnery, out of all places. It's a very strange man. Now, this brings us to the end of this very tragic tale. However, we are going to move forward to a more hopeful future as we go towards the Victorian era, where prisons are now nationalised. There's also a huge invention at the time, which is photography. So we no longer took your ears, we took your mugshots instead. And here at the Oxford Castle and Prison, we'd love to offer you lot the same opportunity, where you can have your very own mugshots taken. You can have them done by yourselves or the groups that you come with here today. Essentially, I would just take your picture, give you a card, and at the end of the tour you can see your crime and your punishment. Just a bit of fun. I can also see the fear in everyone's eyes. Don't you worry, it is optional. If you prefer to not have your picture taken, just let me know. But one thing I do recommend is when we go down this corridor, I want you all to check out a small cell on the right hand side. We've recreated it to look like a Victorian prison cell with a beautifully made cast iron bed. Now that cell was used until 1996, so when I said 3 to 4 people to a cell, it would have been that size. So do check it out. If you'd all like to follow me, right this way. That's the cell I was on about. Far too small, isn't it? Far too small.
They'll probably charge for it. Is it? Oh. Oh, well, yeah. So you can't take it. If you take anything, you'll end up in here. Oh, yeah. Nice, that's where you get hanged, isn't it? Pull the lever and drop, and you drop down. So you can start talking in a sec.
It's tiny, isn't it?
No, it's very tiny.
Way just here, just so I know, basically. Perfect, and I hand that to you as well. Fantastic. Can I interest anyone else? Would you like to go for it at all? Yeah, you want to go for it? Fantastic. So again, you can pick any number you want. If you want to hold up a numbered plaque,
Again.
you could be happy, sad, angry. It's completely up to you, my friends. And in 1, 2, 3. Very mixed emotions going on here. Someone's very happy, someone's very sad. Fantastic. If I give that to you to hold on to then. Fantastic, right this way. Like I said, if you don't want your picture taken, you can skip the queue and just go to the center of the room. But if you do want your picture taken, come over to me. Fantastic. So same again
Awkward doing it with one hand.
for me. Fantastic. There it is. Wonderful. If you want to, fantastic. Yeah, come on through. As long as you can all squeeze around this area here, you're all good. And you want to keep your eyes on this box here for me. Fantastic. And in 1, 2, 3. Far too happy to be in prison. You're enjoying this far too much, honestly. Absolutely, of course. Fantastic. You can all have one by yourself, absolutely. Fantastic. Right this way. And 1, 2, 3. Fantastic, wonderful. Who's next? Who's next? Fantastic. Right this way. And 1, 2, 3.
I would have thought so.
Too cool for school, I have to say, my friend.
Well, it might be.
Fantastic. There we go. Right this way. And 1, 2, 3. Again, enjoying this far too much, honestly. Fantastic. If I give this card to you to hold on to then, my friend, all of them will be on that same card. Fantastic. Would you both like to go for it? Fantastic. Do it together, yeah. Dynamic duo, bit of a Bonnie and Clyde situation. Fantastic. Wonderful. Again, you want to keep your eyes here for me. And in 1, 2, 3. Again, very nice. Just enjoying ourselves, having a good time. Fantastic. If I give that to you to hold on to then, my friend, fantastic. I want one as well? Okay, of course. Fantastic, my friend. So you want to keep your eyes just here for me. And 1, 2, 3. Ah, beautiful smile. Fantastic. What I'll do is I'll do you a switch. There's the other one there for you. Thank you very much. Right, everyone. So, welcome to Victorian prison. Now, life as a Victorian prisoner was a bit of a mixed bag. You may remember at the very beginning of the tour, I said the worst time to be a prisoner was during the Victorian times. Well, things actually started off pretty nicely because we realized how unfair the Georgian times were and we wanted to change that. So going into Victorian times, it was now mandatory for a prisoner to have their own cell to themselves, 3 meals a day, and free healthcare as well. 50 years before the NHS as well. So this was great. The problem was, it was too good because life outside of prison during the Victorian times was so miserable that people saw prison as the better option. So people would commit very small and petty crimes just to get in, like stealing bread or bits of wheat or bits of leather. Just a small enough crime to earn themselves a few weeks in a nice warm bed. But of course, prisons heard about this pretty quickly and they wanted to put a stop to it. So that's why they introduced hard labour, like the capstan wheel I spoke about at the very beginning. Another form of hard labour that we had here was a device called the crank, where you had a metal handle attached to a wooden box and it wasn't connected to anything else. But you expected to turn this handle up to 10,000 times a day. Absolutely pointless. And if the guards came along and thought you found it far too easy, they would then tighten the screws to make it even more difficult for you, which is also where they got their nickname screws from as well. So we ended up going in the complete opposite direction and we arrested people for very silly and strange reasons, to the point where we then overcrowded all of our prisons in England and we thought the only way to fix this was to ship people off to other countries and do hard labour there instead, like Australia. Now, essentially, one of the reasons that you'd be arrested in the Victorian times was you were expected to know the difference between right and wrong from the age of 7 years old. And that was the case of Julia Ann Crumpling, who was 7 years old when she came to Oxford Prison. Her crime was stealing a toy pram, just like this one down here. So she was playing with her toys one day and saw that her neighbour had left it outside their house. So she borrows it and she plays with it without asking. Sadly, her neighbours didn't see it like that and they reported her to the police and she was arrested. Originally, she was sentenced to 21 days of hard labour, as that was the standard sentence for the time. But she was very lucky because her dad managed to step in and make a plea deal with the judge. So her sentence was then reduced to 7 days of hard labour, granted that she goes to school afterwards to get herself an education. So when Julia was here, her job was the laundry, which was still a very difficult task because she'd be doing this for 8 to 10 hours a day, working with extremely harsh chemicals and no protective gloves. So a lot of the time your hands would dry out and blister. But because she was only here for 7 days, it meant that when she left Oxford Prison, she left completely unharmed. She then goes to school, she gets herself an education, and she lives a very full and happy life until she was 80 years old, which in the Victorian times was fantastic. Now, the final thing I'll mention is this room that we're in right now. It's a part of a tower called Debtors' Tower. And in the Victorian times, if you owed someone money and you couldn't pay them back, you were sent to a place just like this. The difference between Debtors' Tower compared to the rest of Victorian prison was the fact that you were a debtor, not a prisoner. Therefore, your circumstances were slightly different. You were given the opportunity to go into town and work off your debt. And when you'd done your day's work, you'd return to your cell in this building, essentially. So if you look up at the ceiling, you can see it's sort of been split off into these triangular shapes. So each triangle would have been a prison cell. The door was towards the center of the room, and they were all split off using black metal bars, just like the ones you can see here. Down here was a little bit different. You can see there's a fireplace just over here, and that's because down here was a communal area where many of our inmates could come together, gather around the fire, and even have hot food. Sounds quite nice, but that's because it all came at a price, because you actually had to pay rent if you were in Debtors' Tower, which was a bit counterintuitive because you go off in the daytime to work off your original debt, and then you have to come back here and gain more debt, making it very difficult for people to leave altogether. In fact, the longest recorded person we had in Debtors' Tower was here for 30 years before they paid off their debt. That's just over half the lifespan of your average Victorian person. However, I am happy to say that none of you owe us any money, so of course you're all free to go. Now this does bring us to the end of your guided tour, but just upstairs is the beginning of our exhibition. There's a timeline that starts from one side of the room and makes its way all the way around, and then continues through to the old hospital wing that we have there as well. So do check it out, and when you're ready to head off, you just carry on down that corridor, come back down the stairs, and exit through the gift shop. But like I said earlier, you can revisit any of the rooms that we've been to on this tour. The only place you can't go back to is St. George's Tower. So the tower that we climbed at the very beginning. I'm sure you don't want to do those stairs again anyways. But besides that, thank you very much everyone, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your time here. And when you're ready, there's some stairs just round the corner over there that will take you up. Thank you very much everyone. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. What was your name? Joe. Joe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's well chuffed with that.
Not too bad, I suppose, was it?
So this is the mound. It's to go on the mound, isn't it?
Was it?
I think so.
Quite sure we'll find out.
Yeah.
Did you see
Oh, that's the code.
Did you see
Get
the
in.
optical illusion?
No.
No, look at it from the side. No, look at it from the side. Can't see nothing.
Yeah. Clever. Don't want to go round again, do you?
No. I need to sit down.
Yeah. Do you want to go in and get a coffee or something?
Yeah, there's a place just outside.
Yeah,
isn't
the
there?
point is everyone's just going to go there, aren't they?
We're not going up there.
No.
We're not going up there. It's too far. My poor body won't make it. Poor old body won't make it.
I love eating bugs.
Stuart, we could just go down. I'm not interested in going round there.
And that, my friends, is that.
I'm assuming this is the way down, because he said that goes round in a circle.
Is it?
No. It's a dead end. A fate worse than death through there and death through here.
The trial of Mary Graham. Yeah. 21 days you've got to stand there doing that. This is that thing you was on about.
Yeah.
Turn it for no reason whatsoever.
But what powers is your fighting going to have? Will you just be able to be fire, or will you have any other powers? You can fly as well.
What's going on in here then? Don't think we're meant to be in here. Yeah, come on. It's that way.
Is it that way?
It's that way. Hello? That way.
You sure?
I think so.
That's
Oh,
not the
maybe not.
exit.
Maybe not. I'll be in down there to the right.
Is this the way out?
It's to the right, yeah?
Thank you.
sweetheart. Dinner time. This way, Mum. Look. And that was
I
that.
don't want anything.
Mum's going up the top of there because I'm too ill to go up there.
Just that way, yeah? Hold it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, take that off. I wanted to go up there.
It's the
but
beginning of Hangman's Hill.
my back's hurting.
Whew. I think it's quite a long walk. Stuart's done his back in, so he's having a rest. This is very steep. Show you what I can see from here. That's where we're going. There's a well. Not much talking going on. I need the air to breathe. I assume you
made it.
see him sitting there, taking a break.
She's oh, fuck it. She made it. I think my mic's still on.
So, on the top of Hangman Hill. Not Hemman Hill, Hangman Hill. Oh, trying to get my phone out of my pocket so I can take a picture on my phone. There we go. Oh, sorry. Okay. We're going down. Oh, missed that on the way up. Vaulted well chamber, 13th century. Wow.
Even if you have to leave, don't forget me. Ready or
Much easier coming down.
I'll be here, waiting on the light to come shine on me. Try to find my peace. Change is on the run, and it's running toward me. And I'm learning to breathe, learning to breathe.
Oh, I feel so much better.
In the quiet, can you give me a sign? If you can
Oh,
hear
hardest part to get down is the steps.
in the still of the night, it feels so heavy,
Oh,
but I'm
hang on down.
carrying through. Ready
That's where we've just been.
or
That was brilliant going all
Here
round
she
there.
comes.
I'll be
Up on the top, where the
Hello.
flag is. That's where 50 steps to get up there, but you stop halfway
shine on.
and you get a lovely tour.
Try to find my
Thank you.
changes on the run, and it's
We'll put the code back in. We'll put the code back in. Put your code back in.
Good point, yeah. Oh, no, I just realised I've got to put the code back in, but I can't remember what it is without getting the paper out. Thank you very much. Oh,
That's my code.
oh, is it different? Oh, come out. What did I do with it? Oh, there it is. It's there.
No, the
It's all been
traps.
built. 1870.
You have to climb over.
Aha!
She's free.
I'm out.